Hi, I'm Emma, and I will be talking about how to write a data sharing agreement for public use of data. The learning objectives of this RDMbite are to know how to enable public data sharing using data sharing agreements, to know what areas need consideration when sharing data with the public, and to know where to share, store, and maintain the data sharing agreement. This RDMbite follows on from another in this series where I speak about writing a sharing agreement between collaborators. Here I talk about data sharing agreements for public use of data, which are guidelines that set out how data can be shared with the public. The details of the guidelines will be dependent on the type of data the project is using, the organisations that are involved, and the legal regulations in the country the researchers and organisations are based in. To enable public data sharing, it needs to be thought about and planned at an early stage. In the next slide, I talk about things to consider when sharing data for public use. But what is important to remember is that details of how, when, and what data is going to be shared and published needs to be included in the data sharing agreement. If this is not included, it can make it very difficult to share and publish data as openly as you might want to. This might therefore restrict the accessibility and reusability of the data. It would also be a good idea to detail in the data sharing agreement how you're going to meet the FAIR principles, as this is the gold standard of data stewardship, and it is important to use these principles even if the data needs to be restricted. More information on the FAIR principles can be seen in our other RDMbites. If you want to share and publish your data for public use, you should make sure you have the rights to share the data by asking yourself these questions. Who was the creator of the data and who owns it? This is information that should be included in the data sharing agreement, and these are the people or organisations that decide if data can be shared and published publicly. Some types of data can never be shared openly, such as personal data, but there are options such as anonymisation that could allow this, or by using restricted access. You need to consider all possible ethical, legal, contractual, or intellectual property restrictions related to your data, which could include GDPR, consent, and patents. You must also check funders and institutional requirements because they will have a data sharing policy that makes it clear how they want data to be made available. Considering the legal and other possible restrictions and regulations that affect your data will establish if you need to limit the reusability of the data for legitimate reasons. You might consider applying a specific license, such as a license that does not allow commercial use. It is important to make the data citable so that you and your research team can receive credit for the dataset. You can do this by depositing the data in a repository that gives a persistent object identifier, so this can be used to cite the dataset. And lastly, once you've considered all the aspects of public data sharing and publication for your dataset, make sure you include a statement about this in your data sharing agreement. As I've already said, it's important to discuss and agree how, when, and what data will be publicly shared and published, so that it is included in the agreement from the start of the research project. The data sharing agreement should be made public, so share it on an open repository. Link the document to the data and metadata by providing persistent identifiers where appropriate. In the document, explain how you will give access to the data, when it will be made available, and what data is to be shared. The data access process needs to be very clear. You can make the data access information more findable in a data paper. Writing a data paper is like an advertisement for the dataset, and it also describes the data in a lot of detail to make it more fair. You can make the data and its metadata more understandable by writing lay summaries. If the data is for public use, the documentation needs to be understandable for a lay audience. This means writing non-technical versions of documentation, such as metadata catalogues and summaries that include the aims, research questions, methods, results, and interpretations of any analysis. Please see the links to additional resources alongside this video.